Hello, fifth grade, and welcome to lesson 5-4, using partial quotients to divide. Let's go ahead and watch our short video lesson, and then, as always, get into our notes and our guided practice together.
How can you use partial quotients to solve division problems? A theater has 375 seats arranged in rows, with 15 seats in each row. How many rows are in this theater? Let R equal the number of rows. Think 15 times R equals 375, or 375 divided by 15 equals R. An area model can help you find how many 15s are in 375. How many 15s are in 375?
Okay, so here we can use our long division to help us solve. Now we know there's no groups of 15 and 3, so we're going to use the two digits together. We're going to look at 37. Now I know 15 times 2 is 30, and 15 times 3 is 45. So I can't do 3, but I can do 2. Do 15 divided, or 15 times 2 will give me 30. I'll subtract off my 30. I'll end up with 7, and I'll drop my 5, and then I have to figure out how many groups of 15 go into 75. So I know 15 times 1 is 15, times 2 is 30, times 3 is 45, and then 60, and then 75. So 15 times 5 is 75. So I'll put my 5 up top. So then I'll have 25 up here. I'll subtract off my 75, and I'll have no remainder left over.
Try 20. 20 groups of 15 equals 300. 375 minus 300 equals 75. 75 is left over. How many 15s are in 75?
Select your answer.
Okay, so here we've already figured out that there's 5 groups of 15 and 75. So 15 times 20 is 300, and then 15 times 5 is going to give you 75.
Try 5. 5 groups of 15 equals 75. 375 divided by 15 equals 25, because 15 times 25 equals 375.
Okay, so let's pause here and take a look at how they solved this problem. Now, the way we did it earlier was we did the partial products and we just stacked them and went down. What they did was they're looking at the number as a whole. So 15 times 2 is 30. So they said 15 times 20 is 300. So they put a 20 up here and they subtracted the whole 300 and we're left with 75. And then they said 15 times what is going to give me 75? So we said 15 times 5. So what they did was they stacked the 5 above it, and then they subtracted the 75 and had 0 remainder. Now, what they did at the end was they combined, or they added, these two partial quotients to get you to 25, which is over here, the 20 and the 5 that you see in the area model.
So there are 25 rows and 0 additional seats in the theater.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our notes and our guided practice for this lesson. So how can you use partial quotients to solve division problems? It says a hotel sets up tables for a conference for 156 people. If each table seats 12 people, how many tables will be needed? So I know there's 156 people who are going to attend this conference, and each table can hold 12 people. So I'm going to use T as my variable for the number of tables, and I'm going to do 156 divided by 12 equals T. Now, what they did was they would have done 12 times 10 gives you 120. So they would have put a 10 over here minus the 120, and then you would have been left with the 36, and then the 3 would have gone above it. Now, this way is a bit shorter. So if you look at how many groups of 12 are in 15, you know, there's one group. So You're going to subtract off the 12 and you're going to have 3 left over, then you'll drop your 6. Now you have 36 this way. Now 12 goes into 36 3 times evenly. So 12 times 3 is 36. We subtract it off and we get a quotient of 13. So 12 times 13 will give us our total for 156 people. So we would need 13 tables in order to seat all 156 people at this conference. Now, another way you could have done this is to break it into the parts. So 156 divided by 12 equals t, or 12 times t equals 156. Now, the way they would have done it here was they would have broken it into parts. So they know 12 times 10 is 120. So your 10 would have gone above your division line first. And then they would have done 156 minus 120 would give you the 36. So then you have to think 12 times what number gives you 36? Well, I know 12 times 3 is 36. So 12 times 10 plus 12 times 3 is going to equal 156. So t is equal to the 10 plus the 3, which was 13. And if you plug in those numbers and multiply them 12 times 3, you will get a total of 156 to match the number of people attending the conference. All right, let's take a look at another example, and we're going to stack and do this the way that they were doing it in the video example, and then I'll show you the regular way to make that connection between them. This one says the factory produces 272 chairs in an 8-hour shift. If the factory produces the same number of chairs each hour, how many chairs does it produce in 30 minutes? So there's a lot of little parts to this question. We know there's 272 chairs in 8 hours, and it's the same number of chairs per hour, but we need to figure out how many are in 30 minutes. So we know 30 minutes is 1/2 of an hour. So that means 8 hours is equal to 16 half hours, right? Because there's 2 half hours in 1 whole hour. So we doubled the number of hours to figure out how many half hours there are. So I know that I needed to do 272 divided by 16, or I could have done 272 divided by 8 and then did my quotient times 2. So I stacked over here 272 divided by 16. Now to do it the way that they did it in the example or in the video, 16 goes into 272, we'll say 10 times. So 16 times 10 is 160. So they put the 10 up here. They did 16 times 10 is 160, subtracted that off, and they were left with 112. And then they found that they had to figure out 16 goes into 112 how many times. So we figured out that 16 times 7 is equal to 112, subtracted off the 112, had a 0 remainder. Now, all the numbers that are stacked up here are our partial quotient. So what you want to do with your partial quotients is you want to add them together. So 10 plus the 7 gave you the 17. So 272 divided by 16 equals 17. So here we can see there's 10 groups of 16 and 160. That's what went up here. So we put that 10 starting in the tens place, right? Because we have our hundreds, our tens, and our ones. So 10 goes in the tens place. The 1 goes in the tens place and the 0 in the ones place. And then there's 7 groups of 16 and 112. So 7 ones. So that goes in, that's written over the ones place. Now, how does that translate to regular long division? So 16, we're looking at 27. 16 goes into 27 one time. So there's a 1 in the tens place here, just like there's a 1 in the tens place up here. We subtracted out the 16, we were left with 11, and then we dropped the 2. So we still have 112 here, just like we had 112 here. We know 16 goes into 112 7 times. So we have the 1 in the tens place, and then the 7 goes in the ones place. Subtract it off, again, 0 remainder. And you have the whole quotient written up here, as opposed to having 2 partial quotients written on top and then adding them. So seeing how they did this helps you understand this. So this, instead of writing the whole number over here, we just write the place value that digit is in. All right, let's take a look at another example. And this one is also done similarly, so you can understand how we transition from this version of long division into the more standard or traditional version of long division. So here again, we're going to use partial quotients to divide. We have 247 divided by 19. So they figured there's 10 groups of 19 and 190. That's the closest we can get right now. So 19 times 10, they wrote the 10 up here, minus 190. So 19 times 10 gave us the 190. We subtracted 247 minus 190, and we got 57. So then we had to think, how many groups of 19 are in 57? Well, I know there's at least two groups of 19 and 57. So 19 times 2 gave me 38. So I put the 2 up here, subtracted the 38, I'm left with 19. So I know there's still another group of 19. So it's not just two groups, it would have been three groups. 19 with one additional group, subtract the 19, have a 0 remainder. And now all of these are your partial quotient. So 10 plus 2 plus 1, which is going to give you 13. Now, if you use the more traditional version of long division, 19 doesn't go into 2, so we look at the first two digits, 24. There's one group of 19 in 24. Subtract the 19, we end up with 5. We drop the 7. We know that 19 goes into 57 3 times, just like we noticed up here. 19 times 3 is 57, subtract it off. We have a 0 remainder, and now we have the whole 13 up here, as opposed to having it in parts over here. Now, to check our work, we're going to do the inverse operation, 19 times 13, to figure out what our answer is. We found our two partial products. We added them together, and we found that we got back to our original whole number, or our dividend in this equation, which was 247. All right, let's take a look at our guided practice. Number 1 says, show one way of using partial quotients to solve 233 divided by 11. So we're going to think 233 divided by 11 equals something, or something times 11 equals 233. So we know 20 times 11 is going to give us 220. So we're going to put 233 minus the 220 is going to leave us with 13. Now 13 divided by 11 is 1 with a remainder of 2. So 233 divided by 11 is going to give us that 21 remainder 2. Now written as long division, we'll have 233 under our division bridge, our 11 on the outside. 11, there's no groups of 11 in 2, so we'll look at how many groups of 11 are in 23. So we know 11 times 2 is 22, so we subtract 22 from that 23, and we're left with 1. Then we drop our next digit, which is the 3, so now we have that 13 that we talked about. 11 goes into 13 one time, so we subtract off the 11, and we're left with a remainder of 2. Now, if you multiply these by each other, if you did 11 times 21, you are going to get to 231, plus the 2 that are our remainder will get you back to 233. For number 2, how can you use estimation to check that your answer in number 1 is correct? So instead of thinking 233 divided by 11, I can think 230 divided by 10. I know any number times 10, we just add a 0 onto the end of it. So 23 times 10 would give me 230, or 230 divided by 10 would give me 23. Now 21 remainder 2 is close to 23, so I know that my answer is correct. For number 3, we had to find 210 divided by 15. So 15 doesn't go into 2, but there is one group of 15 and 21, so we put that 1 over there. 15 times 1 is 15. I subtract off the 15, and I'm left with 6. Then I drop that 0. So how many groups of 15 are in 60? Well, I know 15 times 1 is 15, times 2 is 30, times 3 is 45, times 4 is going to be 60. So 15 times 4, I put my 4 over here, subtract the 60, and I have no remainders. So 210 divided by 15 is equal to 14. Now I'm going to do my inverse operation. I'm going to do the 15 times 14 and see if I get back to 210. If I do, then I know my work is correct. So I multiplied my two digits here. I added my partial product, and I did get back to 210. So I know that my work here was correct. All right, our next one is 575 divided by 25. Now, if I wanted to do it the way they were doing it in the video, I could do 25 times 20 would give me 500. I would subtract the 500 and I would be left with 75. And then I would do 20 times 3 is 75. Subtract that off and have 0. So if I was doing it the way they were doing it in the video, I would have 20 over here and then a 3 above it. And then you add them together and you would get that same product, or sorry, the same quotient. You would add the two partial quotients and get the same final quotient. To check our work, we do the inverse operation, 25 times 23. You add your two partial products here, and you end up with your total of 575 again. So once you find that number, if it matches a dividend from your original equation, you know your answer is correct. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our next question. We have 286 divided by 13. So 13 times 20, so that's the 2 over here, would give me 260. 286 minus 260 would leave me with 26. 13 times 2 equals 26. I subtract the 26. I have a 0 remainder. So my quotient here is 22. To double check my work, I'm going to do the 22 times the 13. So 22 times 13, I find my partial product, add them together, and I do get back to my 286. So now that I got back to my 286, which was my original dividend in my first equation, I know that my answer is correct. And for number 6, we have 960 divided by 32. So if I was doing this as the regular long division, or sorry, as the long division they did in the video, I know that 32 goes into 960 30 times. Would subtract it off and be done. If I was doing it as regular long division with as few digits as time as I can, there's no groups of 32 and 9. There's 3 groups of 32 and 96. So I subtract the 96, I have 0. I drop the other 0. There's 0 groups of 32 in 0. So I put the 0 up here in the ones place. 0 times 0 is 0. So I'm left with a quotient of 30. Now to check my work, I'm going to stack and multiply. 32 times 30, I could do the 0 times the top ones, those would give me zeros, then I drop a 0 in the ones place to work in the tens place, and I get to 960. Or what you can do is if you have a 0 in one of your numbers over here when you're multiplying, especially if it's your bottom number, you just drop that 0 and you start working from your tens place on. And here we did get back to 960. That takes us to the end of our guided practice for this lesson. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.